Hello, bookish buds. Since this is my first video on this booktube channel, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Morgan. I go by the Prickly Peruser in the bookish spaces. You can find me with that username, that tag, on the relevant places. But a little bit about me and my kind of reading taste. I've always been a bit of an eclectic reader. I read voraciously as a teenager because the book world and the friends I made in books were easier to deal with than the real world and the real people out there, and I was kind of a kid that got bullied a bit. And honestly, when I think back on my school years, I didn't even realize that I was bullied until recently, and I looked back on it. But you know what? Trauma is what gets us to where we are, so here we are. I went through a period where I didn't do a whole lot of reading for fun because, you know, work, college, the things of adult life that get in the way. But not too terribly long ago, I picked up a book by chance in Costco. That book was Fourth Wing, and it got me back into reading. I don't look at reviews a whole lot for books. I kind of go off of vibes and I read it, and if I like it, cool. If I don't, then I guess that's time I won't get back. Honestly, I'm not super critical a lot of time, and I think I do happen to stumble upon things that I like because I'm good at reading a synopsis, looking at a book, reading like the first couple of pages and figuring out if I'm gonna be into it or not. I never even read the Harry Potter books because I couldn't get behind the writing style. It just did not do it for me. And now there's other reasons why I wouldn't read the Harry Potter books, but we don't need to get into that now. No hate to you if you love the Harry Potter wizarding world and all that, but don't support J.K. Rowling and all that. That's not a conversation I want to get into here. We got something else to talk about. But I think that's an important thing to know about me, is that I don't really read reviews before I read a book. I like to go into it, I guess, blind, more or less. I mean, I don't think I would have picked up ACOTAR if I had known how popular it was, because I'm also someone who, I don't know if it's the contrarian wannabe edgy kid in me that's like, oh, that's popular, I can't be into that. I'm joking, by the way. Like, I'm a basic bitch when it comes to some things, and my point being here, I don't usually read reviews before I buy or pick up a book. So that brings us to here. We're talking about a romantasy duology by Rachel Howzell Hall. The first book is The Last One, and the second book is The Cruel Dawn. Now, I have talked about both of these books pretty extensively on my other places, Instagram, TikTok, Fable, Storygraph. I do not have a Goodreads, but I do have a Fable and a Storygraph, so find me there. But this is the Vallendor Duology. Sorry, I had to look that up. I'd never learned what the duology was actually called, but I want to talk about it because this series is one that I 100% admit I went into it because I saw this book, first of all, at Barnes & Noble, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I did not buy it at that time because I was there to pick up, I forget which book in the Plated Prisoner series, but ya girl's also on a budget. We're broke bitches over here, and we're also college kids again. I'm working on a master's, but this is not the platform to yap about that. I just like to talk about it because that's a big deal for me, and it's still a little unbelievable. But I didn't pick it up at the time. I knew that I liked it. I thought it was pretty. I liked the sprayed edges because, you know, I'm a sucker for a good looking book. And even more of a sucker if when you open it up, the art is still beautiful. You take the jacket off and it has another beautiful cover. Honestly, I love that they're making books so aesthetically pleasing right now. It is definitely one of those things that has gotten me back into reading because I'm a gremlin and I want to collect and read the pretty things. Is that overconsumption? Yes, But this is the area where I'm allowing myself to overconsume, so don't come at me for that. E-readers also don't quite do it for me, but I'll admit I haven't given them a fair chance. But this, loved it. I read the synopsis. I was captivated. And then when I opened it up, the other thing that I'm a sucker for, probably because I do come from a background where I have loved things like Middle-earth and other fantasies like that, it has a beautiful map. And I'm a sucker for a book with a map. Honestly, one of the things that sold Fourth Wing to me was the fact that it had a map. I like me a good map. Sorry. I'm also a hiker and stuff, and maps fascinate me. So I picked up this book from Book Outlet, actually during one of the fiction sales. And at the time, I think they didn't have the second book, or I probably would have picked them up both at the same time, because I am someone who, if there is a discount site like that and I can get like both of the books in a duology or the whole trilogy or a decent chunk of a series, I'll just get it at once and plan to read the whole thing. Is that perhaps something that I should not do all the time? Yeah, and this series is probably one of the reasons why. However, if I didn't already own the second book when I started reading the first book, I feel like I would have missed out on something. So don't worry, we're gonna get into it. I gotta give you guys a little bit of a tease before we really dive in, don't I? I would also like to note that I will give you the bulk of my thoughts and my review before I do any kind of spoiling, and I will let you know if we're coming up on a spoiler. I'm someone who doesn't care about spoilers. I will watch a review of a book, and if it has spoilers in it, it doesn't ruin the experience for me. There are a couple of books that I have read because Savvy over on Savvy Writes Books gave it a really good review, but I know a lot of these book reviews that the bookish creators put out there, they go through the plot of the book. I'm not going to do that because I'm yappy enough without doing that. But I also understand that some people may go through one of those reviews and not want to read the book even if they were interested before, because, you know, spoilers kill an experience for them. I'm just not someone that it does that for. However, I am very conscious that some people want to see or listen or read a review before they choose to consume something, because we are in a world where our money is precious, our time is precious, and we want to do our research before spending that time and or money. So you're going to get my review. You're going to get my thoughts. I'm going to do my best to avoid any kind of spoilers. We're not really going to go through the plot, but I will warn you if I do give spoilers, and any spoilers should be at the end, so you should be able to click off at that point. Now that that disclaimer and my very long intro is over, let's get into, first of all, the last one. So the last one, I ended up giving a 2.5 star rating, and I still completely stand behind that. I could have probably bumped it down to 2, but this book did have some redeeming qualities. So first of all, I felt like the synopsis and the text of the book didn't really match up super well, if I'm honest. Let's just read the synopsis together real quick, because it will be much easier for me to explain to you if we have that here. So, thrown into a desolate land of sickness and unnatural beasts, Kai wakes in the woods with no idea who she is or how she got there. All she knows is that if she cannot reach the Sea of Devour, even this hellscape will get worse. But when she sees the village blacksmith fight invaders with unspeakable skill, she decides to accept his offer of help. Too bad he's as skilled at annoying her as he is at fighting. As she searches for answers, Kai only finds more questions, especially regarding the blacksmith, who can ignite her body like a flame, then douse it with ice in the next breath. and no one is what or who they appear to be in the kingdom of Vinverdith, including the man whose secrets might be as deadly as the land itself. I mean, honestly, I read that, I was hooked. I had to know what happened. But honestly, from that synopsis, I was assuming that the majority of the book would play out with the travel, and she would maybe get her memories back slowly, figure out what's going on slowly. That's not really what happened. This book did have a lot of action. There was a lot of things happening constantly. There were quite a few fight scenes. And I do get that when you're reading a fantasy book, there's a lot of world building that needs to happen. A lot of times in these books, the beginning can be a little bit tedious because the author needs to let you know how the world works. But my issue is that this tab here, more than halfway through the book, is where I feel like the main plot actually began. At that point is basically when Kai gets her memories back with a massive info dump. And that is the thing that I noticed was a problem in this book constantly, was I felt like I was being told more than I was shown things. And I think that some of the backstory that was told to us in this book and some of the information that was given and the memories, I think that it would have been more interesting to have them woven into the story better rather than just thrown at us in dialogue with some other characters. And even the final climax battle fight scene of this book came to a screeching halt because of a massive amount of backstory being thrown at us all at once. And that was a bummer for me, because I do think that for the most part, a lot of the events in this book, like the major ones at least, did make sense and they did further the story. Not necessarily all the fights. The fights got exhausting and I don't think that all of them really furthered the story at all. And there was a moment where it felt like all the fighting was only there for the reader to see again how badass Jaden and Kai are, which is just exhausting. I don't like it when any book does that. But there were a lot of main events in this book that I feel did impact the plot. But I fear that this book should have been perhaps outlined and storyboarded a little more, for lack of a better term, because the elements are there for me. The execution is where this book does suffer. Now, I also understand that this is supposed to be a story of growth for Kai, and that becomes more apparent when you get into the Cruel Dawn. But in this first book, she comes off so arrogant. I didn't like her. I found her a wee bit insufferable. And I did have a moment where I had to go back and really think about it and question myself. And I was like, no, I know why. It's because she's talking about how good looking she knows she is and how skilled she knows she is. And I don't know, it was just a lot. And I get that she was supposed to come off as a little bit too self-assured and too cocky, too confident. Like, I completely understand that. It's just, for me, at the beginning, she was not really a likable character. She had moments in this first book where I was like, oh, you know what? I get it. I can connect with you a little bit. But then within pages, that was just gone. And that was really frustrating for me. Her relationships with the other characters also kept getting on my nerves because they would go from being at each other's throats to being buddy-buddy all of a sudden, and there seemed to be no real reason for that development. especially with Olivia. Uh, Olivia is one of those characters that just pissed me off constantly. And I just think that she perhaps needed an entire rewrite. I don't know that she was thought out super well, or at least that's the impression that I get by reading both of these books, although Olivia's not really in the second book very much, which was very nice for me. I don't like Olivia. I don't have anything nice to say about her character. She's so hot and cold and just all over the place that, yeah, I really found nothing likable about her, quite frankly. Philia, I don't know. In the first book, she went from distrusting Kai and like kind of hating her to liking her seemingly very quickly. That happened a lot in this book. I don't think that some of the development felt earned in the first book, even a little bit, because I don't know, like I think too much emphasis was put on some of the fight scenes than the actual downtime, because I do think that downtime is important because that's where you get reflection and growth a lot of the times. But don't worry, we're going to talk about it. I do like Philia a lot more in the second book. By the end of the first book, I was starting to really like her. There are 3 more characters we do need to talk about, the first being Veryl. Veryl was my favorite character in this book, and after I went back and read reviews, I think that was a pretty common sentiment. I think that his relationship with Kai was the one that felt the most realistic, especially as you learned more about his backstory and how he and Kai knew each other in a previous life. And I am quite upset by what happened with him. Yeah, that's one of those things that if you do go and read reviews that mention him, you're gonna get spoilers, by the way. And I'm still mad about it. Not the spoilers, I'm just mad about what was done to Veryl. But I can discuss that at the end when I allow myself to talk about spoilers. You can probably guess, though, from context clues here. But let's move on to Ellen. So Ellen was kind of that, like, boogeyman villain type vibe, but I don't know. I had no real feelings about her in this first book for the most part. She was largely not in it beyond tangential mentions, and that's how it was with like all the villains in this book. So it did feel kind of difficult to feel any sense of urgency because I didn't really know anything about the villains in the book until really the end. Ellen popped up in the beginning, and then we saw her again at the end, and we had some mention of some other like villainous characters, but I think they did a better job with that in the second book, or the author, she did. So we'll get into that. The last character we unfortunately have to talk about is Jaden, the love interest, the male main character, and I think there's nothing to like about him, quite frankly. He's set up as this badass, godlike guy that can just fight off anything and protect his damn woman in town. And yeah, that's kind of it. The town loves him for whatever reason. He's got a weird ass tattoo on his hand that he keeps covered, and you don't know why till the end of the book. And there's just no real chemistry between him and Kai. Like, the romance feels super forced, at least in my opinion. I mean, at least 70% of the flirting is just dick jokes. And, you know, I love me a good dick joke, but if most of your flirting is dick jokes, I don't think there's a whole lot between you two. That's just my opinion, though. But it's just, the romance wasn't believable to me. It felt forced, and honestly, in this book, both Jaden and Kai came off as kind of unlikable, in my opinion. But That's my humble opinion. The other main issue that I had with this book, that I also had with the second book, has to unfortunately do with this beautiful map. And you know, I talked about how I love me a good map in a book, especially one that is pretty. I am a sucker for that shit. However, your map needs to make sense with the text. And it was honestly worse in the second book than in this book. But there was a time when they were traveling post Veryl's cottage where I was trying to make sense of the description that was being given in text with the map, and I couldn't. And that enraged me. I considered not finishing the book because of that. But because of cost sunk fallacy reasons, I decided to go ahead and press on. And at the end of the book, there's also a moment where I was like, wait, how did we get here if we were just going west? That makes no sense from where we left to where we got there. Honestly, I still have no idea how she really got to the Sea of Devour, because I guess, spoiler alert, like, she gets there in the end, but that's pretty obvious from the synopsis. Like, I would go into reading this book knowing she's at least traveling there. But yeah, unfortunately in The Cruel Dawn, that becomes worse. And I did film a TikTok, Instagram reel, a short form video about it because I was so enraged. Actually, you know what? Roll the clip. We will put it in right here.
Okay, bear with me. I am reading Cruel Dawn, and I've already found a major issue with the map that's in the book and the descriptions in text. So Kai, the main character, is currently in Doom Desert. She and Z are looking at a map to decide where they're going to go next and try to compromise. So in the text it says Mafford, where the last one started, is southeast. Okay, cool. Makes sense. Doom Desert, southeast, Mafford. And then Cabber, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, please forgive me, is southwest. Doom Desert, Cabber, southwest. Then it says Mount Devour and Sea of Devour are even further southwest. Excuse the ever-living fuck out of me. How is this even further southwest of this from this? Am I missing something? Am I stupid? Or did we perhaps need some more edits? I mean, this map, it's beautiful. I love a good map, but my complaint here is just that if you're going to provide a map, at least make sure your in-text descriptions of where the characters are going at least match the goddamn map. This is one of the things that has been driving me nuts. I noticed it in the first book, and it seems worse in the second book now. However, overall, I'm still enjoying this book more. I think it is so far better than the first book. However, I am only on chapter 8, page 65. So we shall see, but I needed to vent that out.
Okay, we're back now. Can you see why I was so enraged by that? Can you? At that point, I had to stop looking at the map. Throughout this book, I did glance at it periodically, and it never got better. Like, if I go through my notes, because I do have a notebook where I was taking notes while I was reading these, the last one is the reason I started taking notes while I was reading, because I had a lot of thoughts and I had to put them somewhere. But guys, authors, if you are watching this, or even just a clip of this, authors, please, if you're going to put a map in your book, please make sure it makes sense with the text. I am begging you. if it's not going to make sense with the text and it's too much of a hassle to redraw the map or fix the issues in the text, leave the map out of the damn book. Please and thank you. Map issues aside, there were a couple of other like editing issues that I found in the beginning of this book. On page, I believe, 14. Kai takes a drink out of a flask that I presume was given to her by Zephyr Z, who had shown up at that point. I went back and reread like the pages previous and could not find where it was handed to her. She just took a drink out of a flask that had not existed prior. That's an editing error that for a book from a best-selling author from Trad Pub, I would expect issues like that to be caught in the editing process, quite frankly. There was also a section between pages 13 and 16, there was a small paragraph that was word for word just repeated. And it made sense in both places, quite frankly. But reading it so close together was a little bit jarring. And I did go back and confirm that, yeah, they were word for word. That's the other thing that I think should have been corrected during the editing process. That may be nitpicky, but again, for a traditionally published book, I would expect those issues to be fixed in the editing process, and I'm not entirely sure why they got through. I didn't notice anything else like that in the rest of the book, but it was major enough for me to notice, and I'm someone who, like, if I notice a typo or something, it's not a big deal to me, but those were jarring enough that I was like, wait a minute. But in this book, so Z is quickly introduced. It's very obvious that he's another potential love interest. They kind of try to set up a bit of a love triangle for Kai, which is not believable because it's pretty obvious that Jaden is supposed to be endgame, and it's pretty obvious that Z is not as trustworthy as he seems. All in all, I gave this book 3.5 stars. It was a lot better than the last one. And I am glad that I did continue to read this because Kai is a lot more likable in this book. She went through a lot of growth, and I did connect with her a lot more in this book. One of the things I connected with was the love of toxic partners, and that's a little alarming, and I'm gonna need to do some soul searching, but you know what, that's fine. I really appreciated her relationship with Ellen also, and the development there. I think that backstory was woven much more organically into this text, which was really amazing to see. I mean, the artwork in this one is just as beautiful as the last one, but it feels like this book was given a lot more love than its predecessor. Now, I would also like to mention that this is Rachel Howzell Hall's first little excursion into the world of romantasy. So I can kind of understand why these books may have felt kind of clunky, because she's usually a writer of thrillers, and I didn't hate the writing in this book. Like, I do genuinely like enjoy her writing. I just think that in the first book in this duology, she was focusing, or at least in my opinion, it seems like she was focusing a little too hard on forcing that romance into it, whereas there's nowhere near as much romance in this book, and I really appreciated that. I read a lot of romantasy. Like, I like me a good romantasy, but the fact that The Cruel Dawn felt more like a fantasy with some romance, I think made it better, and I think it made the plot flow a lot better. There were less forced fight scenes, which was very nice. I know these books were only published like a year apart, so I don't know how much feedback there could have been taken into account from the first book to the second book, but the second book definitely was a massive improvement on the first, and I really appreciated that. I also appreciated the growth that Philia showed in this book, and I really ended up liking her as a character. I do still have some notes and some things that I think could be changed or like clarified, and I am disappointed that she didn't take up her bow as the shield maiden that she was alluded to be becoming in the final battle, but those are just little things at this point. All in all, I do think that this book concluded things really nicely. My biggest complaint, beyond like the map and like text issues, is that one, the Jaden of it all. I don't really think the ending that he got felt deserved. I think that there could have been more development with his character to make him more deserving of the ending that he got, but he was not really in the Cruel Dawn much, and just his development doesn't feel as believable to me as Kai's, but I do appreciate the development that Kai got, because at the end of it she was a more likable character, and actually through the whole second book she was much more likable, and I do appreciate that. My other biggest complaint, though, that I was starting to talk about before I got distracted, was that all of the villains in this book, so there were 3 major villains ultimately, felt like they got defeated very quickly and very easily. And I don't know if it's just because it's supposed to be like, oh, Kai is so overpowered, nothing can really stand in her way kind of thing, or what, but it felt a little not satisfying. Like, we knew what was going to happen because, you know, good conquer evil, blah blah blah. I would have liked for more in those scenes, but ultimately the ending made sense. It just kind of felt like in the last 100 pages or so of the book, I think it was a little bit rushed to get to the ending. I think that if these books, the events in them, were shuffled a little bit and refleshed out, I think that they could have easily been 4 or 5 star reads for me. Unfortunately, they weren't, and I do suspect that they kind of fell victim to the fact that romantasy is really popular right now, so publishers want to push that out because that's what people are reading, that's what's popular on the socials. It's unfortunate, but ultimately I did get enjoyment out of this. Would I have that same opinion if I'd stopped after the last one? Absolutely not. But these books together, I can say I did enjoy the experience overall, but there's still the major issues with them. Now, spoiler time, so if you don't want spoilers, click the fuck out now. Okay, are you gone? Are we all okay with spoilers here? Got it. I'm so mad that she killed off Varel. Like, she didn't kill off any of the other main core characters, and I don't understand why Varel had to die, quite frankly. He was the only character in the first book that really felt reasonable, or felt like I had any reason to give a damn about them, and she killed him off the way she did. And he was the character that was like starting to get Kai to show development in the first book. I'm still mad about it. I don't think that his death served the plot either. I get that it showed that the dude that killed him, the race that he's from, hates the Renrians or whatever, but I don't think that was deserved. I also am still annoyed that Jaden did end up being endgame. I still, even in the second book, I didn't get the chemistry. Like, I don't know. Frankly, I think Jaden should have just been killed off in the end. I think that would have been a more powerful ending, but whatever. And of course he was a fucking demigod. Of course. Like, I had kind of guessed that by the middle of book 1. It was hinted at pretty heavily, so that reveal at the end, it wasn't as shocking as I think it was supposed to be. And then, yeah, obviously Kai was a goddess. Like, as soon as they read the tale from the book, like, oh, Kai's a goddess, specifically that goddess. But yeah, those are honestly like my spoiler little things that I had to rant about a little bit. But like I said, overall, together, I enjoyed the books. If they had spent more time, I think, in the editing and outlining process, I think I would have enjoyed them more, and they probably could have even been 4-star reads for me. So I am genuinely disappointed because I wanted to like these so bad. The idea was so cool. I appreciated the appendix in the second book, and yeah. Oh, before I let you go, why does Ellen have gold eyes? Because if you're looking at the races, like the immortal races that she's supposed to have in her bloodline, none of them are supposed to be able to have gold eyes. That's the other thing that bothers me, but clearly not enough to put in the main review. So yeah, I think editing is the main thing that I think these books needed more of. And unfortunately, I suspect that they may have been rushed a bit to capitalize on the romantasy trend. But yeah, those are my thoughts. This is kind of long. This is kind of yappy. If you stuck with me this long, why don't you go ahead and click that like button and maybe even consider subscribing? But you know what? I'll see y'all next time I need to yap about some more book stuff. Thank you for joining me here.